In today's segment, we're going to be taking a brief look at some excerpts from a soon-to-be released video, An Insider's Guide to Property Development. Property development is an excellent way to generate a lot of money and wealth, but it's also a great way to lose a lot of money as well if not done correctly. In An Insider's Guide to Property Development, we interviewed 10 professionals that are highly involved in the area of property development, and between them there's about 300 years of experience. And these professionals step us through the various stages of property development and tell us what it is that we need to look out for as well. I hope you enjoy the excerpts, and if you are thinking of getting into property development, I also hope you strongly consider investing in a copy of An Insider's Guide to Property Development.
The majority of my work involves consulting for private individuals who've somehow or another had a problem with their application, a problem with the council dealing with their application, and who possibly even face the prospect of a heritage listing or wish to make a submission to the council on the zoning change. I also provide evidence in the court in matters where an application has been refused by the local planning authority.
From a developer's perspective, what are some of the important things that need to be considered about planning?
Well, effectively, a planning approval is necessary for development to progress. Planning policy includes a mix of quantitative and qualitative controls. The quantitative controls, setbacks, site coverage rules and so on, are generally numerical standards that can be satisfied quite readily. The qualitative controls are a little bit more complex. They require professional judgment to be exercised, and the judgment that a planner makes is not necessarily the judgment that a planning authority will make, and quite often the problems arise in this qualitative assessment area where elements of impact on character and amenity are being considered by the planning authority. That's where the real problem arises, and that's where the significant differences of opinion emerge.
So this qualitative assessment is really the grey area.
It is the grey area. It's an area where the skilled planner, the educated planner, will be able to form some views. Having formed those views, he needs to be able to express them in a report to the planning authority, and he needs to have enough strength in his position to be able to convince the planning authority that his views are the views that ought to be accepted.
Jeff, when you're assessing a potential development site, what are some of the things that you do?
I need to examine the land title information to establish whether there are any factors that might affect the development potential of the land. Elements such as easements, services easements or rights of way could provide a significant advantage to the land as a development attribute, or it could provide for some limitation on the development potential of the land. When I inspect a site, I'm generally concerned about the physical attributes of the land and its neighbourhood, its immediate neighbourhood. I consider whether there's a house on the land that perhaps needs to be retained. I'm interested in the position of trees, and fences, engineering services, and other limitations that could affect the development design.
From a developer's perspective, how could you help a developer if a developer had a great big whopping tree in the middle of the block? How would you be able to help a developer?
We'd be able to obviously inspect that site, inspect the tree, and from that start we'd be able to inform the developer whether that tree can be removed. I've actually heard of a couple of palm trees being stolen overnight that were significant on development sites that just disappeared.
Yeah, is that right?
Yeah. Happens all the time.
Just another thing as well, Mark. What would be the chances if you give a recommendation that a tree can be removed or can or can't be removed? What are the chances that that will actually happen?
I'd say the chances are pretty high, but it's up to the developer to seek the right arborist for the job and to get the arborist to actually comment on that tree and not comment on what the developer wants. Because if you comment on what the developer wants, it might not get through council.
Now, why is that the case? Are there checks in place at the council that can double check what the arborist has done?
Most definitely. Councils have their own arborists, internal arborists in council, and they also bring in independent arborists to cross-reference the reports that have been submitted in regards to that development site?
So basically, a developer can bring an arborist on board.
Yes.
Potentially say to the arborist, hypothetically, here's an extra $500. Can you give us a favourable report that this tree is infested with disease? The arborist could potentially, although you wouldn't do it, but let's say an arborist did do that. What would end up happening is that would go to the council. The council would then send their own arborist out, essentially see that the tree is fine, and then to confirm that, they could essentially get another arborist on board to confirm that yes, it is fine.
Exactly.
And if the developer's purchased the site and has no subject to conditions saying that subject to removal of the tree, they could essentially be stuck with that site.
That's right, with a significant tree in the middle of it.
And potentially be able to do nothing with it.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So the careful consideration of town planning issues as well as tree issues will go a long way towards helping to secure a planning consent. Before any development project though should ever progress, a careful and accurate feasibility study needs to be conducted to ensure that enough profit margin can be made to warrant the risk of taking on the development project. In this next interview, we're going to be speaking with Mark Andrews from DevFees. Mark's the developer of Fees Study 6, which is a property development feasibility software package, and Mark is probably the best person to be telling us about this software. So let's go have a chat with Mark. I'm with Mark Andrews from DevFees. Mark, you're the creator of Fees Study 6. This is a property development feasibility software package that a developer can use to assess whether a particular development project will be viable or not, to determine whether there's enough profit in it, and if there is profit, how much profit can be made from the development project. I've used this software in the past and I'll continue to use it because I see absolute value in it. Tell us a bit about the software.
Sure, I'll go through a few screens.
Great.
That's a bit of a quick tour of the program.
That's
Angela?
excellent. That's great. Mark, this is a picture of the first project that we took on. When we purchased this particular property here, we purchased it with the intention of putting 3 dwellings on the site. So essentially knocking over the existing dwelling and putting 3 dwellings on the site. We looked at the development plan and we were quite confident that we'd be able to do that. The next step for us was to, prior to purchase, was to determine, doing a feasibility study, was to determine whether the project would be viable or not. Now, would it be okay if we were to use this software for me to reproduce that feasibility study just to show our viewers how it was that we had the confidence to be able to go forward with this development project and know that we were going to make a profit?
Sure, just the thing that the program's for.
Mark, from this feasibility study, we could clearly see that there was a lot of profit to be made from this project. Our margin on development cost, the minimum that we're willing to accept, was 20%. We did keep these particular properties in this instant. If we were to have sold the properties, we could go back to costs and selling and leasing, and let's say that the cost of selling the properties was 2%. These are the fees to the agent. We could apply that, and again, we'd still have a margin on development cost of over the minimum for us, 20%, in this instance 23.12%. So clearly from this particular feasibility study, we had confidence that we could develop this site and make money off it. But not only did we have confidence that we could make money off it, but so did the banks that were going to fund us and provide us the money to do this project.
Sure, that's great.
As a finance broker, you've been involved in a number of construction loans. This can be a complicated area. Can you please step us through some of the things that need to be considered when someone's looking to do a development and they need finance to do so?
One of the first question I would look at is ownership. Who's going to own the property that's going to be purchased? Is it going to be in individual names, husband and wife, one name, or is it going to be in a company? Is it going to be in a trust? What type of trust? There's a number of different trusts around the place. Are they looking for asset protection, that type of thing? So that also influences the lender, because whoever is on the title has to also be on the loan and has to be involved. So we need to know the ownership structure and how they're going to, I suppose, work through that. It could also influence their tax as well. So that's critical to know up front. That also can influence when they sign their contracts. What name are they going to put on their contract? If they know what they're going to do long term, They may put it in a company name, or they might put it in their own names, and they may be able to have wording like and/or nominees and assign it over to another entity down the track. But they'd have to get their own advice on that side of it. But it's critical to think of those things right up front.
Sure.
The other is how is the property going to be purchased? And what I mean by that is, have they got cash that they're going to use as a deposit? Or have they got equity that they're going to access? Or are they going to use a property as collateral security? So in other words, are they going to have, say, two properties, they're buying one and taking security over that property and another property, an established property, or are they going to access equity and draw it out and use it as a deposit, or have they got physical cash? And how much have they got available? Because that could influence what they need to cover their deposit, minimum deposit and fees, but also they need to have enough money for working capital and for future. If they're going to subdivide, they need money up front and things like that.
I've been involved in the development industry for the last 30 years or so, and for the last 15 or 20 years as a licensed surveyor, as a director of Fife Surveyors for the last 15 years. I've been involved in some very large subdivision projects of a few hundred allotments, and very many 1 into 2 blocks, that the person off the street would come in and just ask me to look after through the land division process.
So does a licensed surveyor need to be involved in the land division?
Yes, a licensed surveyor who's undertaken specific training for boundary surveys needs to be involved to peg the property as required by the law, and is normally the agent for the land division to set the whole thing up at the start and control the process to make sure it goes down the right path.
Can you lodge a land division application over land that someone else owns?
Yes, you can lodge a land division application over any parcel of land, and it generally occurs quite often when there's a gap between the settlement process and the purchase of the land, so that the land division can actually be started before you settle and the titles are changed.
Okay. What would be the value of that to a developer?
The advantage is mainly in the timing, because the timing process means that you can actually get the start of the land division underway and not have to wait that extra month or 2 months, and that delays the end of the process.
I guess from the point of view of deciding whether you'd want to buy the property or not, would that be of value?
Look, I guess you'd normally make sure that you did want to buy that property and had signed a contract, but then instead of waiting until that contract is settled, you can actually start the process of the land division.